Get me out of here. I promise I won't turn you into a frog again.
Negative.
There are worse things than frogs, you know.
Yo, Space, we arrived at this battery, son. What do we do now?
Perfect. Let's go power up this video.
You can't leave me here. Hey!
This energy will do nicely.
Okay, let's get this started.
Horror icons have haunted audiences worldwide for hundreds of years.
They're huge, strong, quick, resourceful, small, and most of all, scary. From the Wolfman, Dracula, and Frankenstein.
To Pennywise, Jason Voorhees, and Freddy Krueger.
To the Strangers, the Babadook, and the Nun?
These monstrosities leave nothing but a path of bloodshed and chaos behind.
So why not put two of them against each other instead? Starting with the Tall Man, an interdimensional mortician,
versus Pinhead, the Hell Priest Cinnabite. He's Chroma, and I'm Boom. Space Guy Deep Space.
and it's our job to make a video. Dr. Jebediah Morningside served as a medic and mortician on the side of the Union during the American Civil War.
But after years of failing to save and burying the dead, he began to develop a fascination between life, death, and immortality.
And so he developed a machine that would allow him to travel between dimensions.
Jebediah entered that doorway, but what came back can only be known as the Tall Man.
The Tall Man moves from town to town, world to world, dimension to dimension, to kill and create legions of slaves. Among his slaven creations are gravers, lurkers, and sentinels.
Oh my.
Lurkers are Ewok-looking minions made from dead bodies. They mostly work on laborious tasks, such as finding more bodies. Gravers are superhuman brute-like minions that fetch the Tall Man's specimen of the living variety.
But Tall Man's most dangerous minions by far are his sentinel spears that come with a variety of weaponry.
Lasers, saw blades, little trident thingies. These things are versatile.
Now, the Tall Man doesn't just sit back and let his minions have all the fun. When he does need to get his hands dirty, he is more than capable.
Able to lift an occupied coffin with one hand, crush his own sentinel spheres with ease, capable of surviving an RPG explosion with minor burns. In case he does lose a limb, it can be regenerated over time, and the old one will just turn into a hellish creature. On top of his physical prowess, the Tall Man is capable of heat manipulation, mind manipulation, telekinesis, clairvoyance, dimensional travel using dimensional forks. He can teleport himself and others through time and space, resurrect and heal the recently deceased. Oh, and there are tens of thousands of him spread across different dimensions. With great power comes great
responsibility?
Well, in this case, weakness. The Tall Man is extremely weak to cold and certain sound frequencies. When exposed to the cold temperature, the Tall Man's body will deteriorate, except for his gold sentinel sphere in his head.
Small weakness for all that power.
Yes, the Tall Man is certainly a force to be reckoned with. And he won't stop until he... well, I couldn't possibly imagine.
The funeral is about to begin, sir.
Elliot Spencer served as captain in the British Expeditionary Force during World War I.
After having watched all of his friends die around him, he loses faith in humanity and rejects his faith in God.
Suffering from extreme PTSD in Survivor's Guild, Elliot wandered the earth seeking satisfaction and pleasure.
His efforts eventually brought him to British India, where he stumbled upon the Lament Configuration, a puzzle box capable of opening and closing a gate to hell.
Upon completing this strange puzzle box, he was dragged into an extra-dimensional world where he was transformed into a Cenobite to serve the dark entity Leviathan as Pinhead.
Cenobites are summoned to Earth to collect souls and create more Cenobites out of those who are worthy. Pinhead is more powerful than most Cenobites, and he serves as a sort of ringleader to most of them.
Cenobites seem to have unique abilities, such as super strength, disc manipulation, high durability, and more.
Pinhead himself is capable of temperature manipulation, immortality, telekinesis, mind manipulation, and chain manipulation.
His go-to ability in handling targets.
His chains can electrocute, pierce stone, and rip humans apart.
Pinhead also has an impressive defense.
He's able to tank bullets and futuristic rifles as if they were nothing.
The same futuristic rifles see melting metal door locks.
Cinematic Cenobites have only been seen being hurt by intense pressure, other Cenobites, memories of their past selves, the strict rules of Leviathan, and the lament configuration.
Pinhead has only been permanently defeated by the Elysium configuration.
A giant box created by a descendant of the box's creator to permanently close the doorway between hell and earth. Still, those weaknesses don't even hold him back from being a powerful menace.
What you think of as pain is only a shadow. Pain has a face. Allow me to show it to you.
The graveyard was quiet, as any graveyard should be. Quiet, but not silent. Fog tiptoed through the tombstones. The only sound heard through the night was that of owls. And hands. Small hands. Tiny hooded creatures stood huddled around an altar. They were each fiddling away at tiny cubes. They were lament configurations. Suddenly flashes of light sprang forth from the otherworldly possessions. For about a second, the graveyard was full of electrical hisses and light. Then nothing. Not even the owls were hooting now. Out of the darkest recesses of the graveyard they came. 3 humanoid beings surrounded the 9 dwarves. 3 humanoid beings with ghastly features. One was chattering eerily. His eyeless face appeared to be a mass of scars, except for his teeth, which were pulled back with a wire into an eternal grin. Another had the top of her head peeled open, exposing a bloodied cranium. The third wasn't just a third, but a 4th as well. 2 eternally scarred female abominations. Twins even, eyes sewn shut. They were Cenobites, getting closer and closer, until the tiny creature scrambled to make the first attack. It didn't do them any good. The Cenobites grabbed the dwarves, some 2 at a time. One was ripped clean in half, another inside out. The Cenobites were starting to have their fun when he came.
Enough!
On top of the very altar and between all of them crept out yet another ghastly figure.
It is not these Huns that call us.
This Cenobite was pale of skin. Tens of needles poked out of his bald head in grid-like fashion. It was none other than Pinhead.
Come out. We have so much to show you.
Now the Cenobites stood around, inspecting the area carefully.
I've been waiting for you,
Came the elderly yet firm voice of a tall man as he walked straight towards the gruesome scene.
You let us in. Now you pay our toll.
You will have your reward, I assure you.
4 zombified supersized figures lunged along on each side of the tall man, who himself was holding a chrome ball. In a matter of seconds, the 2 forces were at war. The Gravers had the advantage in numbers, and were able to toss their enemies around. At first. As the skirmish went on, Pinhead picked up a lament configuration and looked past the battle confidently. The tall man eyed the box very carefully, scowling. He walked toward the lead Cenobite. The other Cenobites were starting to gain the upper hand against their zombified threat.
Impatient to die, but we have only just begun.
The chrome ball in the tall man's hand came to life and flew towards Pinhead. Pinhead easily dodged away, turning to look at the small sphere flying into the distance, before large hands wrapped around the back of his neck, lifting him high off the ground.
You might not want to take today so lightly,
spoke the tall man as he attempted to crush the Cenobite's neck. Pinhead let out a long laugh.
Strong for foolish old men, but we are Cenobites, immortal.
as I am well aware,
replied the tall man, throwing Pinhead into and through a nearby statue. The other Cenobites turned their attention toward him. They had defeated 3 adversaries already. Yellow corpses littered the surrounding area. Pinhead had already stood himself up and was just brushing debris out of himself.
Was that the extent of your terror? You will make a magnificent gift to Leviathan.
And at that, 3 iron chains erupted from the stone floor of the altar, digging themselves into the tall man's extremities.
Don't steal all the fun.
Shrieked a lone female Cenobite, largely ignored. The tall man fixed his eyes on one of the bloodied puzzle boxes as he started pulling out the chains, one by one.
Where are you going?
Once again, chains erupted from all over, this time enough to fully secure every part of the tall man's body. The other Cenobites joined in too. Their foes were many and strong, but by no means a match for Cenobites. The tall man stopped struggling and glared at Pinhead.
you don't know what you're getting yourself into, boy.
And that is why I must find out.
The chains pulled apart all at once, ripping flesh and painting yellow, blood all over. There was nothing left but pieces here and there. Pinhead scoured the ground with a smile. All the Cenobites seemed pleased.
Wait.
Pinhead's smile faded.
His soul is not yet mine.
The Cenobites looked around for answers, until the tall man reappeared where he had the first time. He observed this scene in understanding. Towards his 5 enemies he walked, and as he did, tens of sentinel spheres, tens of gravers, and tens of lurkers came out of the shadows to join in the march. Pinhead looked around, relishing in the chaos. Most of his Cenobites went forward to fight the oncoming wave. The female Cenobite, however, walked right into a gravestone, entered it, and exited right beside the tall man.
I'll show you real pain.
She shrieked. The tall man smiled and humored her, walking right up to her before she retreated back into the tombstone and out again behind the tall man. Pinhead didn't look amused by this. The female Cenobite attempted to tease the tall man again, walking backwards into yet another gravestone, but the tall man reached right into this gravestone, pulled her out by the neck.
A toy,
Smiled the tall man as the gravestone lost its dimensional pull. The female Cenobite's head fell to the ground. Her body also fell to the ground behind the gravestone beside him. For the first time in decades, Pinhead felt annoyed. The demon princess had always disagreed with him, but this was too far. There were almost 100 enemies walking towards him, and none of them had harvestable souls.
Your attempts are futile, old fool. We are of Leviathan. We are forever.
The tall man's minions rushed forward. Pinhead opened his arm with a smirk as huge chains erupted from the floor. Tombstones, nearby trees, stringing up rows upon rows of victims. Still, the threat was too many. Sentinel spheres flew past, slamming into the other Cenobites. There were larger, deadlier spheres now, knocking them around before the tall man reappeared near Pinhead.
come now. I can end your suffering, boy.
Suffer? How dare you use that word? I have more suffering to show you.
And at that, the world around the two of them faded to pitch black darkness. When there was light again, the tall man wasn't in the graveyard anymore, but a labyrinth. Eyebrow raised, he looked around in understanding.
No more games.
Mocked Pinhead, rounding a corner to lock eyes with his adversary. Tens of large sentinel spheres poured into the room, surprising Pinhead as they rammed him into a wall. Surprise was all they could muster, as the Cenobites summoned more chains to take care of the nuisances. As this was happening, the tall man summoned two small pillars beside him. Pinhead proceeded to melt the spheres, attacking him to his chains.
Going somewhere?
Barked Pinhead before thrusting all of his skewered spheres into the tall man, sticking him into a kneeling position behind his own dimensional forks. Slowly, Pinhead walked towards what was left of the tall man. Pinhead looked around triumphantly.
It is done.
Just then, the tall man's near lifeless head opened its mouth one last time.
It is never done.
From the dimensional forks behind Pinhead came two arms that pulled him into the unknown. The next thing he knew, he wasn't in hell anymore. Or maybe it was hell, just a different kind. It was hard to see with all the red particles blowing in the wind like ash, but Pinhead could make out dusty red city buildings around him. He also made out the thousands of creatures surrounding him on all sides. Above him, 5 gigantic spheres levitated in the sky, similar to his own Leviathan. From the crowd came the tall man.
You played a good game, boy, but the game is over. Now you die.
Before the words fully left his mouth, beams hit Pinhead from above, encasing his vision in white. When the lights finally died down, he was no longer in a red city. He was in a gray room, completely empty except for one single window. Pinhead's curiosity bested him as he walked towards that window. What he saw was Earth, floating peacefully in space, where he couldn't get to it.
What tricks have you mustered this time, old man?
Yelled Pinhead. The tall man reappeared beside him in the very same room.
I've been waiting for you for a very long time.
The walls glowed brightly, and light was all Pinhead could see until it wasn't. Looks like the video's been transmitted in space across the whole multiverse.
Perfect. Now we can go back to Earth ourselves.
Man, the tall man would be crazy if he were real. Even with our best technology, we could only hope to run from him.
Pinhead could have tried for eternity, but with time, space, and clothes on the tall man's side, he's comparable to Batman with infinite prep time.
That's one way to put it, Space. Jeez, I couldn't imagine what would happen if he somehow got onto our...
Guys, please? A little help here?
Crawler, we've got to go. Goodbye, people. And you too, Chef.
What a peculiar sack of flesh and blood you are.
Oh no!